they have always it seems that they put their priority in their employees, and that's what's worked really well for them. And they never cut costs on, when it came to details and making things really special and nice. Like they didn't have to order the cloth napkins that they did for service, or the candle, like all of the little pieces that I felt like were not super cost effective, always paid off for them. Like all of the little details just went into making that place feel so special. So I think I learned too that it's not always the, like cutting corners ever. Doesn't get you anywhere.
This episode made possible by Restaurant Systems Pro. With excitement, allow me to introduce to you today's guest, owner of Cake Vegan Bakery, Deb Simmons. My lady Deb, are you feeling unstoppable today?
I'm feeling unstoppable.
I'm psyched to have you here, and you flattered me. You let me know that you're a listener of the show before I reached out to you. I love talking to people who've listened to the show, getting them on the show because they kind of get it. They understand what I'm going for. I kind of feel like it gives me a longer leash and a little bit more liberty to poke and prod, because you know that I'm here to learn and to share knowledge and to share your story. Real quick, before we dive into what your story is kind of like what is I want to make sure I get it right. Cake Vegan Bakery. What is Cake Vegan Bakery today?
Well, I am a custom online bakery. So everything is done through online ordering, and pretty limited pickup windows. And then a small portion of the business is also wholesale to a couple different accounts in Dover.
Yeah. Wi-Fi burritos being one of them, I believe.
Yeah.
Because I tried one of your snacks. I think it was actually one of these guys that's right here in front of us. One of these cookies.
Probably.
Actually, I might as well just show the camera what we're working with right now. If you're not watching YouTube, you are missing out. We have cameras, and these cookies are amazing. Whoopie pie? Is that like a
gingerbread whoopie pie?
Lord, look at these suckers. I'm definitely going to be eating one of these during the interview. So real quick, what are you doing gross in a year? Give us a picture of the kind of business you're doing.
This year projected to be around like 100. We're doing about 100K.
100K.
Yeah.
And you are sole proprietor?
Yeah.
You have 0 employees?
0 employees.
What is your rent?
It is $1,300.
$1,300 a month.
Yep.
So that's low. So like, what are your biggest operational costs?
Ingredients. Our
cost of goods.
Yep. The biggest expense.
What would you say you're doing percent profit?
Hoping this year to be around 10.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I think when you started, what was your vision? Let me ask you that.
That's a great question. When I started, it was sort of to fill a void that I thought there was in this area and to fill a need. And I saw it, initially when I saw it being like a retail storefront, at some point, but, I think my vision for the business has changed as time has gone on, and realizing more of what I want my energy to be spent on and where my strengths are.
Okay. I think we'll get into that too. And I think it's really important to know that as you grow, as you scale, you have this vision, you have this dream of what it's going to be like, and then you start doing it. And you're like, whoa, maybe like you evolve as you go. And I think the other really important thing I've learned as the host of this show is that success is relative. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you know Tim O'Brien from Cornicello's. What he's doing in Exeter is amazing. He is working crazy hours, but he's passionate about making pasta. He's not passionate about scaling a huge pasta empire. Like he wants to put hands in flour with eggs and roll pasta, and that's what he loves, and he gets to do it, and he gets to be seen for it, and he's happy, and he's like it's all relative is what I'm trying to say. And I want to make sure that we're sharing the power of relativity in today's episode and in all future episodes. So real quick, before we dive into how you got to where you are and where you're going, let's get that motivational, inspirational ball rolling with a success quote or mantra. What do you have for us?
I think something that I've always loved and have carried with me in a lot of restaurant jobs that I've done is how you do anything is how you do everything.
Yes.
And just that details matter.
100%. So, how is that manifested in your life?
I feel everything that I do and have done within this business is very intentional. The product that I put out, the way that I make things, the way that I sell things, there's a reason behind it all. And it's to, make people feel a certain way, to create this community that I want to create with this business as well.
Okay. What is that community you're trying to create?
Yeah. So creating a space where, especially within, I guess there's a few different avenues for this to take, but especially within the community of people that I'm kind of specialized to, which are people with allergies and food preferences and dietary restrictions, a space where they feel safe to eat and don't have to worry and second guess what they're eating.
Is that something that you've dealt with in your life?
Yes.
So are you vegan or dairy free or?
So I was vegan for a very long time. I have a dairy allergy.
Okay.
And that was sort of what propelled, and I have a family with allergies. So it's something that was sort of always the way that I geared the way that I made things. And realizing that in this area, there just wasn't there weren't options.
Right.
Here and there you could find things, but it wasn't, there was a lot of places that I love to go that I don't necessarily feel safe eating either.
Right. And I think this is a great segue into your background. You went to school for nutrition?
Yeah.
That's kind of interesting. So, and not to date you, I saw that you graduated around 2001 or 97. I'm trying to remember the dates.
2001 I graduated
2001,
college.
You graduated college. You went to the College of St. Benedict and St. John's University, and you have a degree in nutrition science and biology.
Yeah.
So what was your vision for yourself when you were younger?
I think my vision was definitely much different then. I, went into school thinking I was going into something very science-based and maybe medical-based. And so I dove deep in nutrition and then added on biology. But in the background of all of this, the entire time I was always, because I have a minor in art as well. And so I was always doing creative things on top of this very science-driven path. And when I graduated, sort of the next step would have been to go to grad school or to choose some kind of research path. And I realized then that was not the path I wanted. I felt like I wanted a break, and I needed to kind of see some things and do something different as opposed to just keep doing school. And I ended up going into Americorps, and I moved out to the West Coast.
So was that from 2001 to 2005, basically? That gap? Because I see that you were working at Nature's Classroom in 2005.
Yeah. Yes. So in that gap, I moved out to the West Coast for a couple of years and worked with Americorps.
So with a degree in biology and nutritional science, you would have had to done more research. You would have been in that path of doing research, and that wasn't. What was it that wasn't connecting with you at that point? Why didn't you want to do that?
I think
you said you needed a break.
Yeah, and it felt like it was lacking a lot of connection, a lot of human connection.
So away in a lab or in books researching.
Yeah, and I didn't necessarily know at the time that I wouldn't go back to it. I thought that maybe I just needed some time to travel and to kind of do something different to see. But once I did something different, I didn't go back.
Yeah. So what was the different that you were doing in Americorps that made you not want to go back? What happened? How did you evolve? How did you transform during this time?
Well, the couple of years that I was in Americorps, they do the program that I did. You do a bunch of different jobs, a bunch of different service-oriented kind of things, and you would travel. The program that I was in, you traveled every couple months, so we would pick up and go somewhere new as a team, and build trails with a nature conservancy for a couple months, and then build houses with Habitat for Humanity, and teach at schools. And, it just gave me a lot of different experiences. But I loved the aspect of being on a team and doing that. And we went into these communities and lived in the communities that we worked in and really built these connections. And it felt like something I hadn't done before, and I loved.
How did it feel to be on a team?
It was great. There's I feel like you learn so much about yourself just in the ways that you interact with different people, the way that people bring up different things in you and bring out different things in you. And I didn't know that I even loved that as much as I did. I worked with them for a year and then as a volunteer, and then took a job the second year leading a team because I liked it so much.
Yeah. So when you were finishing up your, I guess from like 2001 to 2005, that period, like that 4-year period, did you have a new vision for yourself? What were you seeing yourself doing going forward?
Yeah, well, and so after I wanted to keep, like, I loved Americorps so much, I ended up doing the Peace Corps after. And so then I was traveling more, and it was after the Peace Corps that I ended up moving out to the East Coast. And at that point, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I, through a friend who was working at Nature's Classroom, had told me about Nature's Classroom, which is, an outdoor education program for, I think they go like 3rd to 8th grade in New England. And teaching was not something I had done a lot of. I'd done a little bit within Americorps and Peace Corps. And, but at the time I sort of took it as a transitory job. I thought I was going to maybe work there for 3 months and then figure out where I was going to move and what I'd do next. And I ended up falling in love with it and did that for about 5 years.
What did you love about this?
I was with a team of teachers and a team of people, and it was, and I really enjoyed, I think with Nature's Classroom also, everything is super hands-on and very, they have a really cool way of engaging kids and, making science and outdoor education really interesting and super fun.
So this was, you said what grades? I know you mentioned it. It was younger though, right?
3rd through 8th.
3rd through 8th.
Yeah. Mainly.
Were the kids that didn't do as well in the traditional educational system, or parents that wanted their kids to have ulterior perspective?
It's actually, so kids will come, it's sort of used as like a class trip. Okay. So all different students come for 1 week at a time only. And so I also liked that aspect of it. It was this constantly changing sea of faces, So it was all different school districts coming in. So mostly, they were just coming as a supplemental week.
It was just a week usually? Mm-hmm. What were the core takeaways that you were trying to instill in these kids?
Trying to get them outside and to, have appreciation for nature, but not in it as such in your face way, in this way that it was there was all this fun stuff going on. And in the meantime, sneaking science lessons into everything, so whether that was playing Frisbee or, some manic game of tag or something, but incorporating these little science lessons in to lots of activity. So it does end up being this really great thing for kids that do have a hard time in the traditional school or educational model.
I probably would have loved it.
Yeah. Yeah. I wish I would have had something like it as a kid. It was.
So eventually you found yourself in kitchens.
Yeah.
Because so you did that until 2009. And then from 2009 to basically right until opening Cake Vegan Bakery. Are you still working solely in Cake Vegan Bakery? Is this all you do?
Yep.
And you profit, so you have 10% profit. Mm-hmm. Do you have owner's pay? Do you pay yourself separately on top of that profit?
Yes.
So you're earning a salary and then you're also putting away profit?
A small salary.
Okay. Well, I'm trying to get an idea.
Yeah.
Of what are you taking home? Like, what do you pay? Like, because you can't live off $10,000.
No.
Right. So, I mean, we're getting a little ahead, but I mean, I guess what I'm curious, you were working in restaurants from 2009 to basically 2018 when you started this. You were doing two things at once for a while, and then you went 100% in on cake.baker. I keep on saying the dot. I'm sorry. Cake
okay.
bakery. I think it's like that law of primacy. Once you first start doing it, you just can't stop doing it.
It's there forever.
Vegan bakery. So you were kind of double dipping for a while, and then you went solely into the bakery. Are you still working in restaurants today part time?
Nope.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry, I got a little ahead of myself. So,
okay.
Why did you leave? If you loved it so much.
Yeah. I think.
While you tell me.
Yeah. Please enjoy. I needed a break. Again, I did really love it, but I'd never really set out to be a teacher or to teach. And I really liked it, but I also felt like, it had sort of reached peak fun. Like it was time to do something different. And at the time I didn't know what that different was. But I knew that I wanted to move as well. And I had loved the seacoast area so much. I had friends that lived up here, and I felt like, when I would take a break from Nature's Classroom or on the weekends, I would come up here.
These cookies are so good. Sorry to distract you. So you'd come up here. You love the Northeast.
Yeah. And so I ended up moving to Portsmouth, and took a job, and just kind of to get settled, basically applied at every restaurant that I walked into, and ended up getting a job with Red Hook when they were still Red Hook. And and loved it. I worked with them for 5 years.
Okay, so that was Craft Brew Alliance. I wasn't sure if that was Portsmouth Brewery under a different alias, but
no.
Red Hook back in the day was like
the place.
Yeah. I mean, they were way ahead of the curve on the Northeast, at least, for being a micro. But when did they open? Like the 90s?
Yes, I think. I don't know their exact. I think because they had been open almost, 20 years by the time I got there.
So you got there in 2009.
Yeah.
So yeah, it would have been like
sometime
the early 90s, late 80s.
Yeah.
It was here as long as I remember coming to Portsmouth. And I didn't really start coming to Portsmouth until I was like a young teenager. Like, that's when I started making the trips often. So,
yeah.
But great organization to work for. So was that the first restaurant you worked in?
No. I started working in restaurants when I was 16. It was my first job. And have always had that as a side job, through high school, through college. Not while I was doing it, but then I had a long break from it while I did Americorps, Peace Corps teaching. So yeah, that was my first time coming back to it in quite a few years.
You needed a break. Were you wanting to go back to the restaurant industry, or was it like what you could do until you figured out what you wanted to do?
I think at the time it just felt like what I could do to figure out. I knew that it was, something I'd done before. So I knew I could make a certain amount of money while I figured it out.
Right.
It's always kind of been a bit of a safe space to come back to.
Right. Security, it's kind of like people don't understand. Like you don't want to be a server. Some people do want to be a server for the rest of their lives, and more power to them. Other people, it's a place. If you can do it well, if you can do it, like we have a place for you until you figure out what's next. That's one of the things I love about this industry is it gives people that runway to figure out, what path they want to end up on. So you were there for 6 years though, almost 6 years.
Yeah.
And did they end up closing around 2016? Is that when you left?
They, no, they ended up transitioning. So when I started there, it was about the time I think that they were merging with CBA. And that's, after that happened, after I left, they ended up transitioning from CBA to,
Was it the Hawaiian, like Kahlua, Kona beer company? Or
no, that was part of their portfolio. So CBA was Red Hook, Winmer, and Kona.
Okay.
And so they had all of those brands. But they, and I'm forgetting because they just recently closed the pub this like past week. But I'm totally forgetting what they became.
So the pub that replaced them just closed?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's a bummer.
A real bummer. I think it was a little bit of a surprise to everybody. But yeah, so around maybe it was a year or two after I left there, they became this next restaurant that I'm totally forgetting the name of. It's a East Coast brand.
Got it.
Yeah. Anyways.
We don't need it.
Yeah.
So
it'll come to me.
What up, Unstoppables? I have a very special offer for you that could potentially change your life. So listen up. Restaurant Systems Pro wants to make 2025 your best year ever. And here's what they're going to do to help. When you sign up for Restaurant Systems Pro through February of 2025, they will do your books, your 2024 books for you at zero charge. Nothing to you, no cost to you to do your books. Plus, you're going to get all of the Restaurant Systems Pro profitability systems. So this is such a no-brainer deal. If you've heard of Restaurant Systems Pro in the past, listening to the podcast, and you've been interested, now is the time to sign up. Head to restaurantunstoppable.com/RSP or click the link below and make 2025 your best year ever. What were you thinking you wanted to do at this point in your life? What were you holding out for? And you didn't know you wanted to be, you knew you didn't want to work in restaurants indefinitely, but you were, were you kind of waiting for it to come to you?
Well, when I left Red Hook, it was actually at the time that Row 34 was opening in Portsmouth.
Past guest on the show, Garrett Harker restaurant, amazing stuff there.
Yeah, amazing stuff. And one of my regulars was going to be the GM. And so, she had talked about it a lot when she would come in, and I was kind of at, I had hit a point with Red Hook that I was kind of ready for something new. And having her as clientele, and I had known her really well, I was pretty excited about being on the opening team there. When I loved Row 34 in Boston, right. And it felt like a good next move.
I want to say I might have had her on the show as well, because I think I spoke to a GM from Row 34. I've had Gregory Shore on the show.
Yep.
What was her name?
Molly.
Okay. It was Molly. What's her last name?
Oh boy.
I'm pretty sure I'm pretty sure I had her on the show.
Okay.
That sounds super familiar.
Yeah.
So she was working in Boston. She was going to be the opening GM up in Portsmouth.
She actually wasn't working in Boston.
Okay.
Well, there was two Mollys. So you might have talked to the Boston Molly.
Maybe.
There's a Portsmouth Molly that was involved with other restaurants too, and her husband, and maybe husband at the time, was part of Louis, now part of Carriage House. They've been in the Portsmouth scene. Not RJ. Man, I'm doing a really awful job remembering names here.
But the details on that stuff isn't important. I'm just kind of curious about, what was your intention around this time? Mm-hmm. You seem to be gravitating back to the restaurant industry. You knew there was still something else you wanted to do. You didn't know what. So it seems like in this part of your life, you're good at the restaurant industry.
Yeah.
Just to kind of give the listeners an idea, you spend, to get hired at Row 34 isn't easy. They have a really tough hiring process. Like their training is intense. Like they're known for their training. They're known for how well educated their staff are with like the food and the stories behind everything. They're a well-run, well-oiled machine, the Garrett Harker family of restaurants.
Yes.
I don't know what's their official. Do you know the official overarching name for those restaurant groups? It's not important.
Yeah, that'll come to me too.
But to get on that team, I know you're good at what you do. You were recruited for this, right? So you did that for not too long, a little less than a year. Mm-hmm. And then you ended up being a server at the Green Elephant, which is a vegetarian bistro in Portsmouth. Yeah. Last I checked, they had a 4.7 star rating. So that gives you an idea of what they're doing. They're well regarded. You were the GM there eventually. So you went from bartending to being the GM.
Yep.
And then from there, that's when you opened in 2018, Cake Vegan Bakery.
Yes.
So 2015, Row 34, 2015, 2019, Green Elephant Vegetarian Bistro, and then 2018 to present, Cake Vegan Bakery.
Yes.
So you're good at what you do to be a GM at these places. And all of a sudden you're like, skirt, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm going to open my own bakery.
Yeah.
So I would even ask, what did you learn? I mean, like, how did you evolve as a professional? But what you're doing now is so different from what you're doing at Row 34 and the Green Elephant. Like, you were working towards becoming a restaurant owner.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What was like the goal for you? What were you thinking?
You know, at the time, I wasn't totally convinced that what I wanted to own was a restaurant, or that I necessarily even wanted to own my own thing. At the time when I was kind of settled into the Green Elephant, and I loved it there, and the owners, that they're a well-oiled machine too. They're some of the best people in the industry that I've worked with, and I loved it there. But I definitely had reached a point that I was sort of working myself to death, and it was just through my own. It was nothing necessarily that they asked of me, but if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it really well. And I knew that I was going to burn myself out, and that if I was going to work that hard for anything, it should be for something that was mine. So that was kind of the shift.
This was at Row 34?
This was at Green Elephant.
Green Elephant.
Yeah.
What kind of money were you making between Row 34 and Green Elephant?
Great money. Row 34 was good. And Row 34 ended up staying just about a year. It was under a year. And they're great. And I loved working with them. What drew me to them was the education factor, that everybody there was, on their game. You knew everything inside and out. It was this seamless service. But Green Elephant was right down the street. So I would often stop there, like on my way. I would get off my shift and I would go to Green Elephant to have, an after work snack. And I really loved it there, and got to know people there. And, Row had started to, I could feel how it was it was the kind of intensity that wasn't sustainable for me. And so.
What kind of intensity is that?
It's very high pressure. And I think at the time too, they were, because they were brand new, they were figuring themselves out. And
brand new in Portsmouth. So they had this brand that killed in Boston.
Totally.
And from what I could tell, when it came to Portsmouth, it wasn't quite the same demographic.
No, I think, they definitely went through a learning curve in Portsmouth, and, trying, it's a different scene in Portsmouth and a different community. And, I think it took them a little while to find their footing, and what worked for them in Boston wasn't necessarily working in Portsmouth.
Yeah, they're still open in Portsmouth today, so they figured it out, and I think they're doing really well now. Yeah. So it was probably just the associated intensity around that we aren't doing what we were projected to do. We weren't the same the same hit we were in Boston. Portsmouth hadn't quite figured out what we are and who we are, and maybe we hadn't quite figured out what Portsmouth is and who Portsmouth is. So there was that period, that dance of like getting to know the market. Mm-hmm. Between the concept and the market. But I think they caught that. So you were in that awkward period of like, like the early days of still trying to figure it out. So I'm sure there was a lot of extra stress on top of the employees that trickled down.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
So you ended up leaving after only a few months, like 7 months, I think it was.
Yeah.
And then you went to the Green Elephant because there was a vibe there that you liked. Explain what that vibe was. What drew you in as a patron?
It seemed everyone there they really seemed happy. And it was a very genuine feeling. And it just felt more relaxed. but it was this like such attention to detail, like all the food comes out and it's perfection. But it in this such an unpretentious, and calm way.
Yeah.
And yeah. And I mean, I didn't really know a ton about them. I had, definitely eaten at their restaurant in Portland. And they have Boda as well in Portland, which is amazing. And it was a little bit, not necessarily a whim, but I definitely needed a shift from row. And so I did it, and it ended up being great.
Yeah. What was great about it?
Just the owners. I mean, everything there is trickle down. The owners are some of the best people I've ever met, and they treat their employees so well.
Give me an example.
They take good care, like they pay attention, like everything was in its like right place. They pay attention to detail. So everything was always super well stocked. You were never out of things or wondering where things were, or, they never forgot, to do special things for staff meal or,
they made sure you were seen through giving you the resources and the tools you needed to be successful.
Yeah.
But that also acknowledged you through their effort in feeding you and just making sure you weren't going by the wayside.
Yeah. They pay people super fairly. So
you were a server when you joined, right? Or a bartender?
I was a server and then started bartending after a month or so. And then took over their bar program and was their bar manager for a few months.
So when you took over their program, I mean, you had a background in beer.
Yeah.
I'm assuming, were you just serving, or were you a bartender at Row 34 as well?
I was bartending at Row.
Okay, so that's probably where you got into the more cocktail side of things, like because they have a great cocktail program.
Great cocktail program. All of our training was from Jackson Cannon.
Okay.
So
Who's Jackson Cannon?
He's part of that team, but Eastern Standard, he's the man
director.
behind the magic there.
And that's Jackson. What was the last name?
Cannon.
Yeah. Got it.
Yeah.
So you learned from Jackson Cannon, who was like the beverage director for all of the Row 34 concepts in Eastern Standard and Island Creek Oyster Bar. And
yep.
Okay. So that's somebody you want to learn from right there. What did he teach you?
He's like a master in the classics and just in the way, like attention to detail. Again, it comes back to that. He is, a master of precision, and
I mean, that is a lesson in itself, the attention to detail, precision, getting it right every time, especially when it comes to making drinks and profitability. Like, you don't want to waste. You want to make sure it's consistent, standard every time, so you know exactly, want to get that theoretical cost as close to the actual as possible, and that takes precision. Also, you want to make sure that the drinks are consistent. So you take this knowledge, you must be a good learner, because you can't just go from never being like a cocktail bartender to being the GM and director of a bar program. What was that transition like, going from like a bartender to being like the director of a bar program?
It was pretty scary at first, honestly. Like, even just the transition to Row, when I was hired as a bartender, I was like, what is going on? Like, I've been pouring beer for years. Like, I know very little.
That's the
about
only
cocktails.
bartending I could ever do, for the record. So you go from being a first-time bartender, and then within 2 years, you're the director of a bar program at a well-known restaurant.
Mm-hmm. I really liked to work hard, and I loved it was something new, and I loved learning it, and I loved putting flavors together and, meeting with reps and trying different things and, just creating a bar, like a beverage program that I was proud of. Because I think at the time too, when I took over for them, they, when they had opened, they didn't have a dedicated bar manager, and it just kind of put together a menu and just gone with it. And it was okay. but it definitely, I felt like it could be so much better, just because of the caliber of food that they were doing.
Right.
So it wasn't a position that they were hiring for. I definitely presented it to them.
That's awesome.
And said that they should hire me as their bar manager.
So were you like, was it more strictly creative? Or were you also getting into like the profitability side of bartending, like the inventory management, the costing, the upselling? Like how far did you get into that side of the operation?
Yeah, it was all of it.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Well, you became the general manager eventually.
Yeah.
So was it kind of like you created this position for yourself? You killed it. The general manager at the time probably found another opportunity, and they were like, "You're the natural, like go-getter, like type. Like the position's yours if you want it." Is that what happened?
Basically. Yeah.
So what was that transition like, going from being the GM of a restaurant for the first time? I mean, that's not an easy job.
No.
Was it a pay cut?
No. And that's because the ownership there is so incredible.
Wow.
It was an increase. We talked about salary, and it was a very open discussion. And I, was very open with them about what I had been making, and what I wanted to make. And they welcomed that discussion and were very open to paying me super fairly. And, making sure I had benefits. They're incredible.
I mean, if I could guess, as a bartender in Portsmouth, were you working full time?
Mm-hmm.
You're probably doing between $60,000 and $80,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
And they paid you more than that.
Mm-hmm.
So almost a six-figure. I'm assuming this is where it gets kind of weird, but I think it's important that we benchmark this stuff. And I think traditionally what you hear is if you are a bartender or a server and you take a management role, the tradition is that you typically make less money. You're sacrificing money.
Yeah.
That's not how we attract people to this industry and create careers.
No.
I mean, there is the argument that like you learn so much as in that general, like if you want to open a restaurant, you take the pay cut because if you can go work for this group and they can teach you the operations, you can then go on and have like unlimited earning potential if you do your own thing.
Yeah.
What do you think about that in terms of, is that fair?
Experience is great. But you got to pay people fairly.
Right.
If you have to take a huge pay cut to get that experience, I mean, I guess, I don't know. I think people should be paid fairly.
Like, how do you think we got there? I don't know. Like, how do we get to the point where like you have to take a step back in order to get forward? Was it a byproduct of like just trying to hold back your competition? I don't want to go that way. Like, I don't want to like make that assumption, but like, why else?
Yeah, I don't know. It's one of those weird spots where it's, it feels like a low paid, unpaid internship,
right.
Which is, I don't know that there's any time. I was going to say, if someone is like super young and at the very beginning of their career and maybe but I don't know that that's even the right time either. That's just exploiting.
Yeah. So, I mean, let's acknowledge this restaurant group for doing the right thing and giving you incentive and reason to take on more liability and responsibility.
Yeah.
What was it like becoming a first-time GM? What were the parts? Was there a struggle for you?
It was it's definitely a learning curve. It was a lot of things I hadn't done before. And it was a bit of a tricky transition because, there were people that had worked there longer than I had, that had opened the restaurant with them. But it all ended up being okay. All of the parts that were kind of sticky and felt a little difficult.
So the difficult part was like the awkwardness around other relationships that were pre-existing. But what about the actual work? Things that you were never responsible for in the past that you now are responsible for managing. What was that like?
It was hard. It was, I felt like I was learning something new every day, learning where a new person was that I had to communicate with and talk to about, ordering something or. Were
you privy to the numbers at the Green Elephant?
Yeah.
As a GM, I would hope so, right?
Yeah.
It sounds like this is the kind of group that would teach you that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Were they were they a profitable operation?
Mm-hmm.
What did you learn about running a business from these people to stay profitable?
With with them, I feel like they have always put, or it seems that they put their priority in their employees, and that's what's worked really well for them. And they never cut costs on, when it came to details and making things really special and nice. Like they didn't have to order the cloth napkins that they did for service, or the candle, like all of the little pieces that I felt like were not super cost effective, always paid off for them. Like all of the little details just went into making that place feel so special. So I think I learned too that it's not always the, like cutting corners ever. Doesn't get you anywhere.
Right. Especially around your people. If you're taking care of your people, prioritizing your people. You talked about paying them well, seeing them, recognizing them with action, like not skimping on shift meal, things like that. What else? Like what were the other perks? What are the other benefits of working with this group?
They really encourage people to have a healthy life outside of the restaurant. It was probably one of the healthiest restaurant staffs I've ever worked with. There wasn't people, I don't know, people were just generally kind of happier, which is sort of, it's funny at this, vegetarian restaurant, but it was like, I've never worked with so many people that did yoga and didn't really, drink or use a lot of substances, or, which is kind of uncommon in the restaurant industry. And it was somewhere that kind of closed earlier than other places. So people had this healthier balance.
Right.
Most employees that worked there had another thing that they did, whether they were an artist or a musician or, so they...
Baker.
Midnight baker. So it, it was this really, really great staff, like everyone had these really creative things going on. And,
do you think being a part of that team kind of helped push you in this direction of doing your own thing?
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that the owners were so supportive of it. I've always kind of done baking in the background. It's just something I've always really loved doing and always fed people. Like I love feeding people. And so like my coworkers have always been the, recipients of whatever I was working on or making or playing with. And I was doing that at the Green Elephant because I do it at every job that I've ever worked at. And
was it always vegan? Because you had this dairy allergy.
Yeah, because the dairy allergy, happened in like my early 20s. So it's been that way for 20 plus years now.
Are you lactose intolerant? Is that what it is, or is it personal? You don't have to answer the question.
No, it's okay. It's more of it's an allergy as opposed to a lactose intolerance. Allergy? Yeah.
Got it.
Yep. And so, yeah, so even though I am not currently vegan, it's always been the way that I baked. And even though I'm not vegan, it doesn't change, the makeup of my business, which always kind of throws people because they're like, you own a vegan business and you're not vegan anymore.
So you, in 2018, decide like, I want to, I feel like there's a community out there, people like me that I can serve with my unique ability, my unique passion, my unique talent, which is baking vegan food.
Yeah.
Bakery, baked goods. So when you approached your owners at this time, or not your owners, but the Green Elephant owners, how did they receive it?
Amazingly. They were so supportive. And at the time they had asked me to, I had been making some of their desserts for like special occasions, like for Mother's Day or for...
See, that's the path I would have assumed you took into the industry, being like a baker, or what's it called? Like a pastry chef for like restaurants. Yeah. Usually that's the path that's more traditional, but you're just doing this on the side for fun.
Totally. So I don't have any traditional training or...
Right. So you were doing this for them, making some desserts, and like, is that how it came into conversation?
Yeah. Or that's how it came more into conversation. Cause at the time I had, started taking more orders. And I think so I'd always kind of taken some orders on the side, never a lot. I think in the time I started doing it, like even at Red Hook, and I ended up doing a coworker's wedding. That was sort of the first big event that I did.
So you're like side hustling, baking.
Totally.
Got it. How much money would you say you would be making like a year when you like 2017 before going in as a business?
Probably, an extra, like maybe 10 grand or something. Like it was not like big, but it was like, it was getting enough where it was.
The IRS might find out and you might get in trouble.
Yeah. That I needed to make it legit.
What is that cut off? 5,000?
Yeah. I think it was around 2017.
So you said 5,000, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what I said.
Yeah, not 10,000.
Did you? 10,000 after it was legal.
So I'm chewing a cookie right now. So keep going.
Yeah. So it started to become more because, well, the kind of the clientele from the Green Elephant especially were people that were especially interested in vegan baked goods, and there was a lack in this area. Like I was also someone because of the dairy allergy, like I still like I search out vegan restaurants and vegan bakeries, and I would find myself driving an hour and a half on a weekend to go find vegan soft serve somewhere, or if someone had a good vegan donut, if I got a lead on something, I was driving that far with, like would drop everything and go. And there were so many other people in this area that were looking for the same.
Yeah. What caused me to start this podcast is I heard a quote: if you're looking for something and you can't find it, there's a good chance you're not the only person looking for it. And that's an opportunity. So you identified a hole in the market that was being underserved and you wanted to fill that hole.
Yeah.
When you were working at the Green Elephant, were you selling yourself to your client? Like, how did it get out? Like, were you saying like, hey, if you want vegan, like I have these like goods I can sell you. And if you did do that, were the owners of the Green Elephant kind of like, hey, don't do that at any point? Like that,
I actually never did that and never really marketed it. All was word of mouth.
So like the other employees would say something, or you'd bring them in,
or other clientele, or they had a treat at a party they were at because they were friends of people that had ordered. It all was word of mouth. Like at that point I was not advertising. I didn't have a name for anything. It was just like, if you knew, you knew, and then you asked me, and I would, DM a menu to people, and that was the way it started, and then it was the owners were always really cool about me using the restaurant as a pickup spot, but I was also
for clients, not.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
That's a different business.
But like, when did you say to them, hey, like I want to do this and I plan on leaving, and like how do you navigate that? I think that's a really important engagement dance. You want to be respectful of the people that are employing you, who are helping you make it a possibility, right?
Yeah.
And like, what kind of like leeway did you give them? Was it like a 6-month notice, or like was it like, hey, like just so you know, this is what I want to do, I'm not ready yet, but when I am ready, like I'm out of here, so start like grooming my replacement?
Yeah, no, I was definitely nervous about telling them.
Of course.
And I think I gave them, it was over 6 months leeway, and just at the time it was just a conversation. It was like, I think this is something that I want to do, and I really want to open my own spot, and I'm not sure when that's happening, and I'm not going to leave until, I train someone and make sure everything is in a good spot. And their response was better than anything I could imagine. It was, this is amazing. How can we help you? How can we support you?
I was hoping that's
what do you need?
Yes.
Like, let's do this.
So whenever you're like upfront and you communicate, more times than often than not, unless you're working for a complete D-bag, like they're going to be there for you. They know what it's like. They went through it too. And I'm sure you learned a lot from those folks.
Yeah.
Are you willing to say their names?
Yeah. So the ownership, there's four folks that own it. Dan and Bob are the main owners. Dan Sipperson and Bob Wongsai Chow, and that's Boda is Bob and Dan.
Got
their
it.
names together. And then when they opened Portsmouth, they brought on May and Tone, who are the Portsmouth team, and they're.
So was there a mentor in this group of people that was really helping and steering you and coaching you in the right direction?
Yeah. Bob was definitely and he's sort of the main owner, and he was all in, and they have had a history in the past of helping their employees start their own businesses. Like around the same time, one of the Boda employees was starting like a canned cold brew operation, and they went all in and like invested in the business and had started.
Is that the cold brew that's really well known in the seacoast? What's it called?
No, it was up in Portland, and I'm not entirely sure that they're still in operation, actually.
But they went all in to help.
Yeah.
Is the point.
Yeah. And so when I brought this idea, they were ready to go all in too. And so we discussed a lot of different options about them potentially becoming partners, and decided to not do that in the end, which I think was the right move. But they did.
Was that your suggestion or their suggestion? Like, how did that, like, was it like?
I think that it was pretty mutual after we had, discussed everything.
Who suggested it?
They suggested it first.
Okay.
They wanted to, so I shared my business plan with them and what I was planning on doing. And, we had a bunch of talks. Bob was awesome about like answering any of my questions and like helping me kind of, narrow the vision, to what I wanted it to be. And in the end, they ended up, offering me a, no interest loan, to get started, which was incredible.
But they offered you the loan. Mm-hmm. But was that in exchange for equity in the business? Did you take the loan?
I took the loan.
Oh, wow.
Nope. It was.
If that's not a testament to like their character, I don't know what is.
Right.
And like, this is the kind of stuff that I search for in my interviews, is to find these examples, to show people, look, like, success isn't about you and how far you can go. It's about how far you can help other people go. And when you take that approach, it almost always comes back around. You can't measure it, but when you exist to serve others, when you exist to lift other people up, like this, like, I truly believe the restaurant industry has the ability to change communities, because who else is doing shit like this?
Yeah.
What other industry is doing shit like this, where they're taking their employees and saying, oh, you want to do this? Well, we can go with you, or we can just help you get there. Right. Yeah. But I think that the most successful restaurateurs that you read about and hear about are the people that say, you're going to go do your own thing. Like, I can see your talent. Either I can come with you and help you get there and we can go further together, or I can at least let you like do your own thing. But having that mentality, when they do choose to take you up on the offer to become a partner, like, that's how you scale, and that's how you do it, like, organically and sustainably. Mm-hmm. So, why didn't you take, ultimately, what was the decision to go just to take the loan and not become a partner?
I think at the time, after we had discussed everything, I think they realized that, they really needed to focus on their business, and that he said, I don't know that I can. I mean, it was such an honest and refreshing response. It was just, I'm not sure that, I can be that helpful as a partner. So to him, it wasn't anything about like, the money, or.
I don't want to sell you short. I don't want to be the partner you need, or I don't want to be I know I can't be the partner you need, so you're better off just taking the money, and we're here to support you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it was left as an open door. And it was, because I think also at the time, if like, I wanted this to be my vision for it was, to be small, sustainable, manageable. But, he had said, like, the doors are open. Like, if you're ready to make it something bigger in the future, let's talk again.
Let us be the first call.
Yeah. And maybe that'll be the right time.
Got it. So you said he helped you in the early stages with like narrowing down the vision, and like, what were like some of the key pieces of advice he gave you that you think with that advice you've been successful?
That is a good question.
I have another question, if that might spur the
Yeah.
answer too.
Yeah.
He said he helped you narrow your focus, narrow your vision. Like, so you shared your business plan, and he said he helped you with your business plan. He also helped you narrow your vision. Like, what was the original vision, and how did he help narrow it?
I think when I originally presented the plan, and this is when I wasn't totally sure what I wanted it to be. And I don't even think at the time I knew I wanted it to be super small and sustainable and just me. I knew that I wanted to do this, and I think I thought that I needed retail straight out the gates. And so I had a different plan for a whole cafe, and that it would have been a whole different beast, you know, and and so, yeah, he just talked me through that and asked a lot of, great questions that kind of got me thinking more about like what I really wanted it to look like. And, as I started looking at spaces as well, discussing, the ins and outs of those spaces, and also helped, I think, me see what it was going to be, as opposed to this kind of amorphous, I don't know, I'm just kind of making it up. And
so did he recommend that you start smaller?
Not necessarily. I think Bob would have been just like as fine about like making it big right out of the gates. For him, he was always saying, like find something affordable that makes sense. Like he was very particular about spaces. They spent a lot of time trying to get that space in Portsmouth that they have that is, and yeah.
It's a great location for context. It's a brand new facility. So they probably had a lot of like tenant like improvement or tenant, like if you know how to negotiate a lease, like you can get a lot of your costs. If that thing is fixed to the building, if it's a hood, if it's plumbing, if it's electrical, and they're in the development stages, like you can have a lot of that cost bared by the developer, by the owner.
Oh, totally.
So they probably realize that it's a corner lot in like great foot traffic area, downtown Portsmouth, on on the edge of the side of Portsmouth that's open, meaning there's room for even more growth, and you're seeing the growth. Like they were on the outskirts of downtown Portsmouth, like not that long ago, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, 8 years ago, and now all the development that's going just west of there. Like they're
center.
Exactly. And that's the kind of real estate you want on the edge, because it always grows from the inside out. And if you can get on that like leading edge of like the growing side, so they have great real estate. So he knew. So, I mean, I think the big thing when I look at what you're doing here in terms of like starting small, like your rent, you said was $1,200.
3, so 13. But when I started, I was in the space next door only.
Okay. What was your rent
new, and my rent was, I think, $450. So like, I think a lot of times people have this dream of like what they want, and they try to go for that dream on day one. But if you can he was smart, because he said, keep your costs manageable, because you don't want to be undercapitalized. Yeah. And I think what's important, we live in a world today where your marketplace is as far as you want it to be. It doesn't have to be your storefront. It can be this digital world, and you have a unique product that is keyword searchable, vegan bakery, and you can own that SEO for the New Hampshire seacoast, and you can be discovered. And you can also leverage social media to get in front of people. So you don't need to take the majority of your income and put it towards real estate. You can start a brand small, or you can keep your cost of goods and your labor down. Yeah. Because now you're the only person doing it. So like, this is like, I love sharing stories like this, because I feel like a lot of the times I get people on the show who have like 10 locations, and they opened their first location in 1998, and that was a different market then. Like you couldn't do what you can do today then. You can start so much smaller, and there's a lot less risk. Yes. And, being able to, have, like the majority of my business is online sales, and that's huge. And like, there's definitely a time when that would not have been possible to build a business that way. And, and a majority of my business in the beginning was built through, besides word of mouth, it's mostly word of mouth, but like through Instagram and, some very rudimentary social media posts.
We'll get into, so like you find a spot in One Washington. He convinces you to start small. Does he help you focus on your product being just vegan?
After No, like it was more about the space and the funding. And then he was like, it's your idea, go with it. Like that was sort of kind of the end of mentorship. I know I could have kept asking him more questions, but at that point I was also really ready to just trial by fire and make it my own. And
so when did you know you were ready to break ways? Or part ways, I should say.
Yeah, it was probably, so when I started looking for spaces, I kind of had a little, I don't know, I had a bigger range just because I wasn't entirely sure what it was yet. And I still, I didn't know if it was going to work out or like what was going to happen with it. And I was looking at some shared spaces in this building. At the time, there's another bakery in here, Three Sisters, and they're awesome. And they were renting space in their bakery. And I was like, well, maybe that's the right way to go. Like, I don't know that I'm ready to commit to a space. And at the time, I had not discussed money. I don't think at that point, Bob and I had discussed taking a loan from them. And so I was looking at my own finances. And, I also have not, I haven't worked in a bakery before. So I was setting this up from scratch without knowing anything.
Yeah.
And I was making it up as I went. So I was like, I'm not entirely sure that I should, buy. Anyways, I was looking at shared spaces and realized the, problem with that straight out the gates with trying to create these allergen-free products. I can't control what other people are making in the kitchen. And so I really needed my own space and my own equipment. And, the first space I looked at in here, it was about the size that I have now, but it's about double the space of what I ended up getting. The person that went to see it before me signed the lease while I was in the parking lot.
Oh man.
But I had,
are they still here?
No, they, became the space where, Dos Amigos went before they became Hi-Fi and moved out of the building. It was a gelato place.
What up, Unstoppables? I have a very special offer for you that could potentially change your life. So listen up. Restaurant Systems Pro wants to make 2025 your best year ever. And here's what they're going to do to help. When you sign up for Restaurant Systems Pro through February of 2025, they will do your books, your 2024 books for you at zero charge. Nothing to you, no cost to you to do your books. Plus, you're going to get all of the Restaurant Systems Pro profitability systems. So this is such a no-brainer deal. If you've heard of Restaurant Systems Pro in the past, listening to the podcast, and you've been interested, now is the time to sign up. Head to restaurantunstoppable.com/RSP or click the link below and make 2025 your best year ever. When they left, did you want to move back into that spot, or did you think you were in the right place with what you had?
I felt like I was in the right spot. Once I got, even though that little space over there, it's about 350 square feet, and it was tiny, but it was affordable. It was so affordable.
$400 a month.
$450, yeah.
Yeah, wow.
And at the time I was like, well, I don't want to make, if I increase my space and increase my rent, then I want to right now be able to build and focus on creating a really great product, getting a really good product out, and not forcing sales because I have this overhead.
Right. Right. So, what was the initial investment you think that you had in your head to get started?
In my in my head, I thought that it was going to be very affordable. I think because when I had talked to Bob about money, I said that I thought that I probably needed $15,000. $15,000 to all said and done. Like I could get the equipment that I needed. This is coming from no experience. So I had, had costed out a bunch of things that I needed, and I thought that would be enough. And I also I'd saved a good amount of money from working for them. And so I had...
How much money did you save, if you mind asking?
Yeah, I had about $20,000 set aside that I knew that I could spend to start. And so I thought all in all, like the 35 was about what I needed. And
so you said 15,000, then 35 was what where did that additional 20,000 come?
Oh, that was my own
so
money.
You had 35.
Yeah.
And did that include your operating costs, like to like cover your first couple months of like not making enough money?
I thought that it would.
Yeah.
And it did. It got very close though. Way closer than.
But you ended up getting a loan, right? From Bob.
Yes. Yeah.
Was that was that the $15,000?
Yep.
So, okay. So you projected it would be about $35,000 with the 20,000 and the 15,000 you got. And that's all you ended up taking out. So you did make it work.
I did make it work.
Wow.
You know, it definitely, the money went really quick. Equipment
Where'd it
is
go?
expensive.
What was your biggest expense?
I mean, equipment and then getting that space set up, it just took longer than I thought it would.
What was the most expensive equipment you needed to purchase?
Refrigeration, and the oven, you know, like that. Those
what kind of oven did you get?
The oven was a whole process in itself, because of this building. I ended up not necessarily getting the oven that I wanted. But that was a lot of added expenses because it's an old mill building and because there is, they work pretty closely now with the Historical Society and get a tax break. Very little can be done to the front of the building anymore. And so there was some issues with oven venting and that it ended up working out, but it was almost the sort of expense that would have not allowed me to open.
Yeah. What I love about this building, did I cut you short? You said,
no.
I don't want to cut you short.
No, that's okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, this building, you've heard it mentioned a few times on the show. Evan Hennessy's Stages at 1 Washington is here.
Yep.
Brett Winterstein, his commissary is here. This is where the Dos Amigos commissary was that Brett Winterstein took over with Hi-Fi Burritos. There are multiple restaurants in this space, or just food prep spaces.
Yeah.
It is an old mill building, like you said. So like there's big hallways, big doorways. You can get stuff in and out. It's a very utility, like commercial friendly space.
Yeah.
So, and the rent, $400 a month.
Yeah.
No storefront or no street front in terms of like exposure, but there's a community of businesses here too, which I think is really important.
Yeah.
So what was the oven that you ended up getting?
It is an electric, just somewhat small in terms of bakeries, but just convection, pretty basic. Because the initial, it was supposed to be a nicer double gas oven, but I ended up not being able to have gas in here after I'd already spent a whole bunch of money getting the gas lines moved and getting it set up. And
how much money did you spend?
Oh, that was a few thousand that disappeared.
Yeah. So this is the kind of stuff. This is when people think, oh, it will cost me $100,000, and then $300,000 later. It's because all these things that you make assumptions. You really got to get in there, and this is when it pays to have an expert, a consultant, somebody who is like a broker or like a kitchen design, because they know the questions. They can foresee the things that will cause issues, so they know what questions to ask before you go and buy the equipment.
Mm-hmm.
At least you didn't buy the oven before.
I did.
You did? Oh, sorry.
It's okay. I ended up. It was a long process, but
were you able to sell the
company took it back.
Oh, that's nice. They refund you?
Mostly.
Okay.
Yeah, most of the money.
How much money was it?
The oven itself was right around $5,000.
And then the lines, a couple $1,000s for the lines to be rerouted.
Yep.
So that's $7,000.
Yeah.
Approximately,
And I got some of that back from the oven. Not all of it, but most of it.
So like almost a third of your total like savings to get it open.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is
And that was the first, and I was it really. It was a long stretch of time where I was waiting to get word from the company and the manufacturer of the oven, actually, because it was a Blodgett. They helped me get my money back from that company as well.
Thank you, Blodgett.
They were amazing.
Yeah. I love the Blodgett pizza ovens, the double deck. Was that what you were looking at?
It wasn't a double, or not a pizza oven, but it was a
I spent a lot of hours in front of a Blodgett pizza oven.
Yeah.
I love those things.
Yeah, they're the best.
Put one on a trailer.
Yeah, you should.
What was the next challenge for you in terms of costs? So you spend money in the space. Did you factor in like a multiple months of like paying rent?
Yes, but there was more, and because the rent was so low, I wasn't super focused on having to pay the rent for extra months, because it did take a good chunk of time while I was waiting, and I had started renting the space in, I think, the end of October in 2018, and then I was at the Green Elephant until I think the end of March of that year, or the next year, 2019. And then I assumed, my naive setup brain, that it would be ready to go in, like April or May. And I think it was end of July. So, I mean, in terms of like setting something up, I know it can take much longer, but it definitely felt like a long time to kind of be doing nothing. Because at that point, I did not have, a secondary income anymore. And
so you stopped working in March of 2018, 19?
Yep.
And then January, February, March, April, May, August. It's almost 6 months after so you didn't have that overlap income.
Yeah.
So you didn't actually open this until 2019.
Yep. So I was hustling, and, finding ways to make it work, and selling cake. I just wasn't doing a lot of it. I couldn't work in the space. I didn't have the equipment all set up yet, and had to wait for final inspections until all of that was done. And that was in July of 2019.
So from July to March, you're operating like you intended.
Yeah.
And then March of 2020 happens. Yeah. And I bet you were happy you were in this space.
Totally. I was at that. It seems so fortuitous that I decided to structure the business in the way that I had and build it this way, because I was, in this building. I had no contact with the public. Everything was online already. I was already super set up for it. And I decided to pivot a tiny bit in that time because everything felt so uncertain. So I didn't know what would happen. So I added delivery in, and I just sort of started doing these weekend deliveries. I would do a special menu and then drive all over and bring treats, and it got really popular. And 2020 ended up being a great year for the business.
Was that your best year so far?
No, actually the year after.
2021?
2021.
What'd you do with revenue in 2021?
2021 was, I probably did, and it was a huge leap from when I had started. So I think 2021 I did maybe like 120.
Were you still operating with the same percent profit, or have you gotten tighter on the cost of goods and like efficiencies?
I've gotten tighter.
Yeah.
Just
just as profitable maybe, but not as much gross.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, yeah. I think it was just, there was a lot of sales that year. And I was still, I think I have gotten better about just keeping things a lot tighter now. And that's out of necessity too. Everything has gotten way more expensive, and yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. In terms of how you set your business up, so you do what percentage of all of your orders come in online?
Of all of them.
So 100% online ordering.
Yep.
Through your website.
Mm-hmm.
What did you build your website on?
Squarespace.
And how are you taking transactions? What is your commerce platform?
Square.
Okay. So Square POS?
Yep.
And how's that been?
Awesome. I love Square. I use their invoicing because I do all orders as a prepaid situation, and I use them for everything. They're fantastic.
So I'm going to, I just typed in square.vegan bakery, pulling up your websites, trying to at least, there it is. cakeveganbakery.com. So when I get into your website, the first thing I see is all of our favorites. So it's like a list of options, basically. Or are these click?
No, those are just, are you looking at the homepage with all the pictures?
So /menu. So if I wanted to order, would I click on menu?
Menu would give you all the options.
Now. Okay, so I'm on menu. Okay.
So you go to menu, and
so
that
all
is
the options.
All of our, I keep referring to the business as a we, it is a me, but so, it's all of the options, and then flavor wise. So the majority, everything that we're doing online is cake and cupcakes. So even when I'm feeding you here is some of the stuff that I've been playing with that I use for wholesale accounts, but everything is cake and cupcakes, and everything is ordered as a special order, whether it's a half a dozen cupcakes or a wedding cake.
Okay. So when I click on order now, I see ready to place your order, ? Fill out the form below. Pickups available Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 12 to 1 p.m. or 2:30 to 3:30 p.m. Saturday, 10 to 10:30 p.m., 11 to 11:30 p.m. We will be back with you on a confirmation and pickup. So you go, basically, you're giving the instructions so people understand what to anticipate.
Yeah.
So before they place the order, they know like this is how it works. So they don't place the order and then you say, okay, come pick it up when you're not available. Yeah. So you're being upfront with that information. I like that. Was that a lesson learned the hard way?
Totally. Yeah. I feel like all of the wording on the website it was out of lessons learned. There's going into this new year, I think I am going to be switching up my ordering platform a little bit and utilize some more of Square to do, because right now everything is it's submitted in a kind of lengthy order form that's very wordy to something a little simpler, so that there's that wordy form for very specialized custom orders, and then for something that's quicker, like a half dozen cupcakes or a little small birthday cake, it'll just be easier to order with some very set out options.
And who will you go to help you with that website build out? Like your website is basically like your storefront. It's your restaurant.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure that user experience is good. It's not like, when you walk into a restaurant, you can see there's a queue here. There's sometimes footprints going to where to stand to place your order. Mm-hmm. You got to think like that on your website.
Totally.
To make that there a path of least resistance to purchasing and upselling. So. And
I feel like my website right now does create some obstacles. You kind of have to work for it a little bit.
Right.
It does. There's a lot of steps.
So where would you go, or where do you plan to go to make the optimized website for your business?
That's a great question. I'm looking around still.
Let me get in touch with Square for you. Maybe we can work something out.
Yeah.
Because I think there would be a learning opportunity here. If I can live vicariously through you, then
great.
Let's make it happen. So I land, when I click on order now, that redirects me, or I have to fill out an order now form. So name, email, phone, and then you're checking which option.
Kind of leads you through
kit?
some options, Okay. So like right now we do these holiday cookie decorating kits. So that's like your first option. Those are ordered very often through the month of December. So that's on the order form now. And otherwise it's cake or cupcakes. And then, so it'll kind of lead you through to pick your size and direct you back to the page if you hadn't, checked it out already about what sizes are offered and what those mean. And then the menu, I think, there should be a direction to the menu, but choosing your flavor, and then it gives some options for, choosing a design if you're ordering far enough in advance. So I'm
filling out the form right now. I click the gluten-free cookie kit for $35. If I want that, do I have to click anything else, or do I just go to the bottom?
You just go to the bottom, and then you'll click a pickup time.
There's more notes for allergies, other instructions.
Yeah, like I said, it's pretty wordy.
Design work required. So if I don't want design work, do I just click no?
Yeah.
I'm not ordering design work. And then book sold out dates, 12, 4. So those are dates 12/24 to 1/17. Are you just closed those days?
Yeah, I'll be in.
So then I select
home.
the day that I'm going to pick it up.
Yep.
Do I have any interviews Wednesday? All right. I'm actually doing this like for real.
Great.
All right. So I think I'm good to submit. Oh, man. So it does say like form submission failed. So I probably, because I'm not great at reading, I probably missed. So it says cake required. Okay. So I see what you're saying. So you have to select is it prices listed or starting prices. So cake required. So you have to pick whether it's a cake or not. Or
that's, this is a good thing. I didn't
so
know
I see
that
now
that was
why
a required option.
You're going to make some changes.
Yeah, totally.
All right,
because
that makes sense.
Here we are uncovering all my faults.
But this is also a perfect example of how like you only get one chance sometimes to
Yeah.
capture the business.
Yep.
So you got to make sure that experience is seamless, because they might be like, fuck, I got to go. Like my kids or bus is going to be here.
Yeah.
And then like if they don't get to it in that moment, they might not have the opportunity to experience your food, and they might never come back to it. I'm not trying to put you on the spot here. Sorry if that's what happened.
Oh, no, you're
But
not.
it's a great learning opportunity.
I already know that is something that's been happening, and it's, and that the opportunity for that is there. So, and I'm in a spot now where I feel like I'm ready to, I have the resources now to put a little more energy into fine-tuning that ordering, fine-tuning my website, and outsourcing some of it. I feel like I've done so much of everything on my own, and some of that is just, a lot of it is my own kind of stubborn, I can figure it out and I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do this in the, most economical way, do it myself.
Right. So you're basically relying solely on the Square platform for, in Wix, or no, Squarespace is the website. Is that owned by, that's all the same, isn't it? Squarespace, or is it not?
No.
I always get confused sometimes.
They're not the same.
So you're on Squarespace, which is drag and drop.
Yeah.
And then you're using Square POS for the commerce side of things, which has plugins.
Yeah. And I know that I could have the website through Square too. So I'm thinking
this might be a fun project for me.
Yeah.
I think we should work on this together. We should tag team this and see what Square recommends, and see if we can't get some like special attention too, with the caveat that I get to record everything for others to learn with us. So in terms of your business beyond the website and stuff like this, in terms of best practices, what else have you learned?
I feel like I've learned a lot about what I want this business to be, and what, what's important to me moving forward, and how I grow it.
Okay.
And
so, go ahead.
Even when I took over this space, so it's just been within this year that, cut a hole through this wall, and, kind of almost tripled the amount of space that I had. And again, I started setting up, this space for retail, and keep going back to this retail idea, and I'm still not totally sure that's what I want it to be. And I'm trying to build things in a way that it's not just more, because more can just be more. And so I want to make sure that what I'm putting in is super intentional. And so I've got this great space now that, at some point I'll start doing pop-ups again, because those work really well in this building. But yeah, just try, even bringing somebody on, which I considered this year, and I talked to someone that I think would be a great fit. I just want to make sure I'm super intentional about that, and that everything is in the place that I want it to be, and that it financially is going to make sense. So
this year was when you blew out the wall and you added a door and you doubled your footprint.
Yeah.
Has it been operating at a loss now because your operational costs increase?
Yes. Yeah.
By twice as much. Are you now paying $1,300?
Yeah. And so
more than twice, almost 3 times.
3 times. Cause my rent had, it had increased in that space. So when I had come over, I think $550 was the most I was paying for that tiny space, through the almost 5 years that I was in there. and then taking this one on.
$100 increase in 5 years isn't too unreasonable.
No.
Especially considering the market we're in.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I think they're increasing spaces in this building more now, especially once they added the residential, and it's just a lot of people want to be in this building.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, all ships rise with the tide, right? And I think once you get some success here and you prove the model and you have all these, like this, I think like there are so many empty buildings out there that just aren't being utilized in cities all over. I think of Lewiston, Maine. I drive by this building all the time when I go into Lewiston, and it's a giant mill building just like this with boarded up walls. Mm-hmm. And like that is like a struggling community. Yeah. You know, like why aren't we creating more opportunities, low overhead opportunities like this across the country? Mm-hmm. And that the culture within the four walls of this building too, like the support. When you approached the Four Sisters initially, were they three sisters?
Three sisters.
Thank you. Sorry, maybe there might be another sister on the way. Who knows?
There might be.
So when you approached the Three Sisters, were they receptive? Having another bakery come into their space?
Definitely. They were so great, and they were so supportive. And yeah, there was never any sense of, like mean competitiveness or any, it was
we're in this together.
All ships rise. Like sure. And they, and then when I ended up not renting from them and taking the space, I mean, they've been great too. It was just, they
knew you got to do what's best for
questions.
You.
Yeah.
And you had those challenges, like you mentioned, with the gluten-free and the dairy-free. You had to be careful with that stuff. Yeah. Liability is huge. What about the relationship you have with Brett Weinstein, who referred you to me?
Brett is amazing.
Sorry, Winterstein.
Yeah. He's great, and he's been supportive, super supportive the whole time. And they were my first wholesale clients, and they encouraged me to do that. And so because they had asked, I decided I would figure it out and add it as part of my business. And and they've been great.
They're just do that being what, wholesale?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I mean, it was out of necessity too. They needed a dessert option for the restaurant, and wanted something that they wanted to sell. They wanted something that was high quality and not just a afterthought, which sometimes, especially if you're not going to hire someone to do it within your restaurant, it can kind of be an afterthought. Right. It's just a poorly made cookie or a.
So you said that you kind of continue to question your vision for the space, even as you take over the space. Like, do you really want to do retail? You said the space is great for pop-ups. How are you using pop-ups?
I used pop-ups a lot. I haven't done them in a long time. When I first opened, and I stopped doing them in 2020, but when I first opened, and that's when I was just with the 300 square feet there, would pop open, and it was amazing. It was a great way, and I didn't know how that would turn out either. That was just sort of me throwing everything at the wall and seeing what would stick. And I wanted a way for more people to try things, because the people that knew, and that was how my business grew. It was just word of mouth. But the pop-ups became awesome. And it was an unknown in this building with like very little foot traffic. It's not necessarily super easy to find things.
So other businesses were popping up in your space?
No.
You were popping up in your own space?
Yep.
And how would that work?
I would take display items and a shelf and fill it up with goods. I would blast on social media that I was going to be open from these hours on these 2 days.
So basically short-term retail, where you can come during these times, you can come pick up without ordering in advance.
Yeah. Come and get it. You can, and that way people got to try a lot of different things, because then you didn't have to.
So the space we're sitting in now with the display box behind me, you want to bring pop-ups back? Pop-ups
back.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you're questioning that. You don't know if you want to do that.
I think like pop-ups, yes. Full retail, no.
Why?
I think it changes my focus. And I am then back in a space of managing employees and managing a different set of employees. And I don't feel like that's what I want to do right now, or that's the kind of growth that I want. Right. I really love the clientele that I have currently, and I think I have worked really hard to build that. And they trust me, they know me, they come to me, for all of their, big and small moments in life. And I think if I add retail, I don't want things to get super muddled,
right?
Or like to have to take focus off those people. I mean, but I also understand that there are a lot of people that haven't tried me because sometimes there's clunky bits of the website that
we can change that.
Through. Yeah.
Yeah, we can change that. But I think you're onto something here. And I think it's really important is like, I feel like we kind of look to see what other people are doing. We kind of get pulled into this trap of this is what I have to do to be successful. But when you look at like, what is success?
Yeah.
What is success for you? What is your vision? Like, do you feel like you're successful?
I do. For me, I feel that it's that I can, sustain a lifestyle that I want, which is not this huge flashy lifestyle, but like everything that I need is taken care of, and I have, really loyal and happy clientele. Like for me,
what do you need that's being taken care of?
I really just mean like basic expenses. Like, I can pay my rent and maintain my lifestyle and, like.
Do you feel safe and secure?
Yeah. Definitely. And I have the space within the way this is built because it isn't, retail, and I don't have, like, if I need to take time off, I take time off.
Do you have, so what I'm hearing from you, you have freedom of purpose.
Yeah.
You have freedom of relationships
mm-hmm.
in the clientele you have and the relationships you have. You have freedom of time.
Yeah.
And you can, like you said, you can take the time off. You can do what you want to do. You have flexibility in time.
Mm-hmm.
You're not being locked down by your business. Your business doesn't own you because you have retail hours that you need to make sure, like if somebody calls out sick, then you have to cover those hours.
Yeah.
You have freedom of money.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people think that they see these grand visions. I'm guilty of this. I have these literally in my mission statement, it says I want to change the world,
yeah.
Yeah. And like you want to go for that, and then you trap yourself and you overextend, and like you end up just like burning out, right?
Yeah.
But if you have freedom of purpose, freedom of relationships, and freedom of time, do you really need much more money? Freedom of money. If the last freedom is freedom of money,
yeah.
Like how much money do you need if those freedoms are being taken care of?
Totally.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I think that's one thing that we, as a society, could be better about communicating. It's like we put freedom of money over freedom of relationships, freedom of purpose, freedom of time. And when you do that, you just end up having a life that you work so hard for that you just can't appreciate.
Totally. And that, yeah. And I don't want that. Right. I've had that at many other points in my life, and have redefined, like what success looks like. And, and I feel like I like where the business is now. And it doesn't mean that I won't grow it or won't do something different with it, but, I'm doing it very intentionally and very slowly.
Yep. You were going to say something else?
Maybe, but now it's, okay. Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess, is there anything we haven't discussed today that you were hoping that would come out of today's discussion that has not come out of today's discussion?
I feel like we covered a lot.
We did. Yeah. I mean, I am curious, like, so it sounds like you're kind of at this crossroads right now. Like, where do
mm-hmm.
I put my energy? Like, what, if you could do one thing in this business going forward that would like take maybe to get like more freedom of time, more freedom of money, more freedom of relationships, more freedom of purpose? Like, what would that thing be for you right now?
I think I've gotten better about asking for help when I need it, but I think that's always been a really super hard thing for me. And I think outsourcing some things that aren't necessarily a super joyful thing for me, like things like social media, would be the next step. Finding some help within those areas that I sometimes just kind of let go lax. Cause
why don't you like social media?
I used to really love it, and now I don't know. It kind of feels, it started to feel like a chore.
What changed from loving it to having it feel like a chore?
That is a great question. I think I just got really busy with other things in the business, and it became kind of an afterthought. And so I don't feel like I was posting things that I wasn't putting that much energy into it. It was always kind of this thing, or it feels like this extra thing that I have to do. And it used to feel a lot more joyful and light. I loved it. I loved going on and making posts. And now I feel like there's some energy lacking in my social media. And I'm not entirely sure why that changed, other than I just got really busy, and I don't know. And I think I don't maybe spend enough time with social media to keep up with, like the right ways to do it, the right times to post, so that the algorithm catches you and, people see your posts, and to not have it feel super like discouraging when your posts just kind of disappear.
Yeah. I mean, you're preaching to the choir. I myself am trying to be better about social media. And the reason why the why I find to be better about it is because I'm working too hard to do the right thing to not let people know about it. And it's just like, what's the point of doing the things that you do if the world can't find out? And I try to focus on like those things that I'm doing, like living out of a camper, like sharing the stories as to why, like, I'm here today talking to you because Brett Winterstein told me to talk to you. And, like, I'm trying to create something that is organic in nature, that is focusing on not what mainstream media tells us you should focus on, like being like, I try to avoid vanity metrics. Like, there's a why behind everything I do. And if I don't communicate that why, then it just gets lost in like the noise of the internet. Right. Yeah. So like, I think maybe when you first started, it sounds like you had like this why, this purpose, like this community, this thing that you were serving. And then the reality of it is when you get into the thing can beat the shit out of you. The thing can bring you down, and that energy and that motivation that you had early on that you were excited to let the world know about, like you can kind of be pulled off of like the why, and you get lost in the how.
Yeah. And
I mean, I hear you. Because I feel the same pain where I'm like, I fucking hate social media. Like, I don't want to do this. Like, it's stupid. It's horrible. It's like, I see all the bad things that I associate with social media. Like, I don't want to be a part of it. Yeah. But like, you can be a good voice. I feel like you can be a positive. Like, I'm definitely a hypocrite to my advice right now, for sure. I want to identify that.
I feel like it's so tricky. It's like, I understand its value, and then I hate it, and I love it, and I know it's important, and
for sure,
it's never just one thing.
I have really enjoyed listening to your story and learning from you today, and I think that you are a shining example. Like, when I started this podcast, again, like I was thinking like, I'm gonna go after all these successful restaurateurs, and I'm gonna share their success stories, and I'm gonna share how they made millions of dollars and how they had these amazing lives. And then I started to realize that unlike the multi-million dollar like tech startup companies that I was used to listening to, and like those entrepreneurial stories when I was listening to podcasts, the restaurant industry has a lot more reality and grind to it. And that it's really, you don't get into this industry for the millions of dollars you're gonna make. Can it happen?
No.
Yes.
Sure.
Is that success? I wouldn't say that like you got to sacrifice a lot to get those things. I think that the cool thing about the food and beverage industry is that there's so much passion associated with it, that if you focus on the passion, and you focus on the relationships, the passion being your purpose, and the relationships, the freedom of relationships of who you do business with, and then doing it around the life and building a life that you want, like that money, while it does provide security and other things, it doesn't have to be the most important thing. And I think that people like you can be a shining example of that if you focus on the purpose, and if you focus on the relationships, and you focus on, building that balance, then the money will come. But if you focus on the money first, you will burn out before the money ever gets there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what's the future? Like, anything you want to share?
Well, that's a great question. Well, some website updates. Going into this next year, I want to start utilizing this space right behind you with pop-ups, and just kind of adding adding a few things. And yeah, kind of feel that out. That kind of, where I'm moving into in the next year is like finding a way to streamline ordering, getting somebody on social media. So social media can be more, more relevant, and let someone that loves doing it.
I bet there's got to be somebody in Dover that would, if you're listening to this or the seacoast area, hit her up. We'll share the contact information.
Yeah.
At the end. And one question I want to ask you before we wrap up, or a couple of questions I have, is what is one thing about your business, a value, a process, a system that's truly uncommon and that makes you unstoppable?
I think the slow growth and intentional growth, to me feels great and feels different than other places. And I think just being super adaptable, being able to shift things when they need to shift.
And I would say the way you were doing it is the way to do it. Start as small as you possibly can and let that cash flow determine growth.
Totally. I don't buy new equipment until I can afford it.
Yeah.
I've only, taken out that initial loan and then have only tried to, scale in sustainable ways.
And like the way you're doing it in this building in particular, if you can let your physical growth be in one spot and you can literally beat down walls to make that happen, and to keep your liability as low as possible, this is the way to do it. You're doing a great job.
Thank you.
The mission statement is to change the world by inspiring, empowering, and transforming the industry. And I think we're going to do that by sharing one transformation at a time. If we can make an example of individual transformations, we can inspire others to do the same. And if we're inspiring others across the industry and the nation to evolve, then the world will change. So how have you personally evolved?
I feel like within this, I think I've become better at sticking to what's true to me, to sticking to my intentions, to only doing things that feel authentic and feel like me. I've got less people pleasy, because I think when I opened, I just kind of said yes to everything because I wanted to make sure it worked, and I wasn't entirely sure what it was that it was going to become. And I feel like I've been able to define more of what I want the business to be and what's true.
I love that.
To me.
If you got the news, you'd be leaving this world tomorrow. All the memories of you, your work, and your restaurants would be lost with your departure, with the exception of 3 pieces of wisdom you could leave behind for the good of humanity and your legacy. What would those 3 pieces of wisdom be?
Be nice to people. Be kind. I think that goes with everything I've been talking about with building community and building clientele, and just be nice to people. Be adaptable. Be able to pivot and change and stay relevant. You got to grow with people, with society.
What's number 3?
Eat a cookie. You'll feel better.
I love it. This has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much, Deb, for coming on, getting vulnerable, opening up, sharing numbers. You're a listener of the show. You know what I'm after. You know why I'm after it. And that vulnerability, that transparency helps what we're doing so much. So I just can't say thank you enough. And if we enjoyed today's podcast and we want to reach out to you, maybe we're trying to do something similar in our community. We want to connect with you. What's the best way to connect? Or maybe we want to order some gluten-free, dairy-free baking.
Yeah. Email is the best. That's on the website. It's cakeveganbakery.com. And Instagram, Facebook is all at cake.vegan bakery, cake.vegan bakery.
Got it. And who do you respect and admire? That's how I discovered you.
Yeah.
Brett Winterstein said you got to get Deb Simmons. She's creating a great product. She's an awesome person doing awesome work. We've made it happen. We shared your story. Who else should I talk to?
I've got 2. I think you should talk to Helen and Jay, who own Auspicious Brew, also in this building. They're amazing. They've built a really incredible business. They've got the brewery right down the hall from me, and have turned it in to this incredible event space. And yeah, they're just doing cool things.
So is that the two, Helen and Jay?
Helen and Jay.
Got it. And I already asked how we can connect with you. This is where I say I thank you again for all the things I mentioned: being vulnerable, opening up, sharing your knowledge, sharing your experience. There is no questioning, Deb. You are unstoppable.
Thanks.
Thank you. Cheers.